Marcus Chen sat in the back of his black Mercedes, scrolling through emails on his phone as his driver navigated through the familiar streets of Riverside, the small town where he grew up. Marcus had left this place 25 years ago with nothing but a worn backpack and a dream. Now, at 43, he was returning as the founder and CEO of Tech Vision Industries, a company worth over $3 billion. He was here for a business meeting about opening a new factory that would bring jobs to the struggling town. The meeting had ended earlier than expected, and Marcus found himself with 2 hours to spare before his flight back to San Francisco. His assistant had suggested a restaurant in the town square, but Marcus felt a strange pull toward the old neighborhoods he once knew. He instructed his driver to take him to Pine Street, where he had spent most of his teenage years. As they drove past the old movie theater, now closed and covered with faded posters, Marcus felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. The pizza shop where he had his first job was still there, though it looked smaller and sadder than he remembered. The park where he used to play basketball had new equipment, but the same old oak tree stood in the corner, its branches reaching toward the sky like arms welcoming him home. "Stop here," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to a small diner called Rosie's Place. He remembered this spot. It used to be called Sam's Diner back in his day. The building looked the same, just a bit more worn around the edges, with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read "Open." His driver looked concerned. "Sir, are you sure this doesn't look like—" "It's perfect," Marcus interrupted with a smile. "I'll just be an hour. You can grab lunch yourself." Marcus stepped out of the car and straightened his expensive suit jacket. He felt overdressed for this neighborhood. But something about this place called to him. Maybe it was hunger, or maybe it was the need to reconnect with his roots before flying back to his penthouse in the city. The bell above the door chimed as he walked in. The diner was nearly empty, just an elderly couple in one booth and a construction worker at the counter. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, reminding Marcus of Saturday mornings when he was young, and his mother would take him to places just like this. He chose a booth by the window and picked up the laminated menu. The prices were surprisingly low. Nothing cost more than $12 in San Francisco. A simple sandwich would cost triple that amount. He smiled at the simplicity of it all. "I'll be right with you," a woman's voice called from the kitchen. Marcus glanced at the menu, trying to decide between the burger and the meatloaf special. When he heard footsteps approaching, he looked up ready to order and felt his heart stop. The woman standing before him with a notepad and pen was someone he never expected to see again. Sarah Mitchell, his high school crush, the girl who sat 2 rows ahead of him in English class, the girl whose laugh could light up an entire room, the girl he never had the courage to ask to prom, the girl who was voted most likely to succeed in their senior yearbook. But this Sarah looked different from the confident, radiant girl he remembered. Her once bright eyes seemed tired, with dark circles underneath them. Her hair, which used to flow in perfect waves, was now pulled back in a simple ponytail. There were worry lines on her forehead that hadn't been there before. She wore a plain waitress uniform with a name tag that simply read Sarah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah's eyes widened with recognition, and the pen in her hand trembled slightly. "Marcus," she whispered, barely audible. "Marcus Chen, Sarah," he replied, his voice catching in his throat. "I can't believe it's you." She stood frozen as if seeing a ghost from her past. Her cheeks flushed with what looked like embarrassment, and she quickly tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "What are you doing here?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Business meeting in town," Marcus said, still processing the shock of seeing her. "I had some time, so I thought I'd drive around. See the old neighborhood." Sarah nodded slowly, clutching her notepad like a shield. "Well, welcome back to Riverside," she said, her voice professional, now distant. "What can I get you?" Marcus stared at the menu without really seeing it, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. How did Sarah end up here? What happened to all her dreams? He remembered so clearly the day she gave her valedictorian speech at graduation, talking about changing the world and making a difference. Everyone believed she would do something extraordinary. "I'll have the cheeseburger and coffee," Marcus finally said, though food was the last thing on his mind. Sarah wrote down his order with shaking hands. "Coming right up," she said quickly, turning to walk away. "Sarah, wait," Marcus called out, his voice softer now. "Do you have a minute? Can we talk?" She stopped but didn't turn around immediately. When she finally faced him, there was something guarded in her expression, something that broke his heart a little. "Marcus, I'm working," she said quietly. "My shift doesn't end for another 3 hours. After your shift then," Marcus pressed gently. "Just coffee, please. It's been 25 years. Sarah glanced toward the kitchen. Then at the clock on the wall, she seemed to be weighing something heavy in her mind. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said finally. "Why not?" Marcus asked, genuinely confused. "Because," Sarah paused, searching for words. "Because you're Marcus Chen now. The Marcus Chen. I saw your face in Forbes magazine last month. And I'm just—" She gestured at her uniform at the diner around them. "I'm just me." Those words hit Marcus harder than any business rejection ever had. "You were never just anything, Sarah," he said firmly. "You were the smartest person in our entire school. You had scholarships to 3 different universities. What happened?" Sarah's eyes glistened with tears she was clearly fighting to hold back. "Life happened, Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Life happened." Before Marcus could respond, the elderly man from the couple in the corner booth raised his hand. "Miss, could we get our check, please? I'll be right there." "Mr. Patterson?" Sarah called out, grateful for the interruption. She hurried away from Marcus's table, leaving him sitting there with more questions than answers. Marcus watched her as she moved through the diner, taking care of the elderly couple, refilling the construction workers' coffee, wiping down empty tables. She moved with efficiency, but there was a heaviness to her steps, a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. This wasn't the carefree Sarah who used to dance in the hallways between classes. This was someone who had been carrying the weight of the world for far too long. His mind drifted back to their senior year. He had been the quiet kid from the poor side of town, the one who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation and brought peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day. Sarah had been everything he wasn't. Popular, confident, destined for greatness. Yet she had always been kind to him, not with pity, but with genuine warmth. He remembered the day she defended him when Brad Morrison, the football captain, tried to steal his lunch money. She had stepped between them, her eyes blazing with righteous anger, telling Brad that real strength wasn't about intimidating people weaker than you. Brad had backed down not because he was afraid, but because everyone respected Sarah, including him. Marcus had fallen for her that day, completely and hopelessly. He used to write her name in the margins of his notebooks, practice conversations he would never have the courage to start, imagined scenarios where he would save her from some disaster, and she would finally see him as more than just the poor scholarship kid. But he never said a word to her about how he felt. How could he? She was Sarah Mitchell, and he was nobody. The irony wasn't lost on him now. He had built an empire, proved to everyone that the poor kid could become somebody. Yet here was Sarah, the girl who had everything, working as a waitress in a struggling diner. Sarah returned with his burger and coffee, setting them down carefully. "Anything else?" she asked. Keeping her tone professional, Sarah, Marcus said, looking directly into her eyes. "I'm not leaving town until you talk to me. I don't care if it's after your shift. Tomorrow or next week I came back to this town for a meeting, but maybe I was supposed to come back for this. For you." Sarah's professional mask cracked for just a moment, and Marcus saw the vulnerability beneath it. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the faint ember of the girl she used to be. "Table 5 needs attention," a gruff voice called from the kitchen. The cook, a large man with a stained apron, was glaring at Sarah through the service window. "I have to go," Sarah said, already backing away. But Marcus saw something in her eyes before she turned away, something that looked like hope. Or maybe it was just the reflection of his own. Marcus couldn't focus on his burger. He took a few bites just to appear normal, but his attention kept drifting to Sarah as she moved through the diner. He noticed things now that he hadn't seen at first. The way she winced slightly when she bent down to pick up a dropped napkin, suggesting back pain from long hours on her feet. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she interacted with customers, as if she was wearing a mask that had become too heavy to hold up. The construction worker at the counter left a small tip, barely $1, and Sarah thanked him warmly anyway. That simple gesture told Marcus everything he needed to know about what her life had become. She was grateful for scraps when she deserved so much more. An older woman entered the diner, probably in her 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes. She wore a similar uniform to Sarah's and immediately tied an apron around her waist. "Sorry I'm late, honey," She called to Sarah. My daughter's car wouldn't start again. It's okay. Rosie, Sarah replied with genuine affection. Tuesday lunch shift was quiet anyway, so this was Rosie, the owner, Marcus thought. He watched as the two women exchanged a few words near the kitchen. There was a warmth between them that spoke of more than just an employer-employee relationship. It looked more like family. Rosie glanced over at Marcus, her eyes widening slightly as she took in his expensive suit and watch. She whispered something to Sarah, who shook her head quickly. But Rosie was already walking over to his table. Welcome to Rosie's place, she said with a genuine smile. I'm Rosie, I own this little establishment. Sarah tells me you two went to high school together. Yes, ma'am. Marcus stood up politely and extended his hand. Marcus Chen, it's nice to meet you. Rosie shook his hand with a firm grip, studying his face with the kind of wisdom that only comes from years of observing people. You're the tech billionaire, she stated matter-of-factly, not a question. Saw your interview on the news last week about the new factory. Guilty as charged, Marcus said with a humble smile. Rosie nodded slowly, then glanced back at Sarah, who was pretending to organize menus at the counter. Sarah's the best worker I've ever had, Rosie said quietly, so only Marcus could hear. Never complains, always on time, treats every customer like gold. But that girl carries more weight than any person should have to bear alone. Marcus leaned in, grateful for any information. What happened to her, Rosie? She was supposed to conquer the world, Rosie finished his sentence. I know. She told me about her scholarship to Columbia University. Full ride, everything paid for. Rosie paused, her expression growing sad. But life doesn't always care about our plans. What happened? Marcus asked again. More urgently this time, Rosie looked at him carefully, as if deciding whether he deserved to know. Finally, she spoke. Her mother got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer right after graduation. Sarah gave up her scholarship to stay home and take care of her. Worked 3 jobs to pay for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Her mother fought hard for 2 years before she passed. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He remembered Sarah's mother, Mrs. Mitchell, a sweet woman who volunteered at the school library and always had encouraging words for everyone. By the time her mother died, Rosie continued, Sarah had nothing left. No savings, no scholarship opportunity, and debt from medical bills that would crush most people. She tried going to community college while working. But then her father had a stroke. He's in a nursing home now, needs round-the-clock care. Sarah visits him every day after her shift here. The weight of it all crashed over Marcus like a wave. While he was building his empire in Silicon Valley, celebrating IPOs and closing billion-dollar deals, Sarah was here, sacrificing everything for the people she loved. She wasn't working at this diner because she failed. She was here because she succeeded at something far more important than money. She had been there for her family when they needed her most. She never married, Rosie added softly. Never had time for herself. Every penny she makes goes to her father's care facility. She lives in a tiny studio apartment above the hardware store. Walks to work every day because her car died 3 years ago and she can't afford to fix it. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. Not at Sarah, but at the unfairness of it all. Why doesn't she ask for help, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Because she's Sarah Mitchell, Rosie said with a sad smile. That girl has more pride and dignity in her pinky finger than most people have in their whole body. She doesn't want pity. She wants to stand on her own 2 feet. But Marcus, Rosie looked at him intently. Pride doesn't pay bills, and dignity doesn't keep the lights on. Marcus looked over at Sarah, who was now refilling salt and pepper shakers. Completely unaware that her life story was being shared. She deserved so much better than this. Thank you for telling me, Marcus said to Rosie. Rosie patted his shoulder. Just thought you should know, she said. Now you want pie? Apples fresh today. Marcus barely tasted the apple pie that Rosie brought him. His mind was working at lightning speed, calculating, planning, trying to figure out how he could help Sarah without offending her pride. He knew from Rosie's words that a direct offer of money would be rejected immediately. Sarah wasn't the type to accept charity, especially not from someone who had witnessed her fall from grace. He pulled out his phone and quickly typed a message to his executive assistant. Jennifer, cancel my flight, book me a hotel room in Riverside for the next 3 nights. Also, I need research on nursing homes in this area, specifically information about a patient with the last name Mitchell. He paused, then added, And Jennifer, this is personal. Keep it confidential. The response came within seconds. Consider it done, sir. Anything else you need? Marcus looked around the diner, taking in the cracked vinyl seats, the outdated fixtures, the flickering lights overhead. An idea began forming in his mind. Something bigger than just helping one person. Something that could lift this entire community. Sarah approached his table to refill his coffee. Her movements were automatic now, practiced from years of repetition. "How's the pie?" she asked, still maintaining that professional distance. "Delicious," Marcus said. "Rosie, this is really the best apple pie I've had in years." Rosie beamed from behind the counter. "My grandmother's recipe," she called back. "Secret ingredient is a dash of cinnamon and love." Marcus seized the moment. "Sarah, what time do you finish your shift?" She hesitated, glancing at the clock. 4 o'clock, but Marcus, "I really don't think—" "I'm not asking you on a date," Marcus said gently. Reading her discomfort, "I'm asking you to help me with something." "Something professional?" That caught her attention. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Professional?" "Yes," Marcus said, his mind racing to make this work. "I'm opening a factory here in Riverside. We're going to need to hire about 200 people from the local community. I need someone who knows this town, knows the people, someone who can help me understand what this community really needs." He paused, letting that sink in. "You grew up here. You've been working with people from all walks of life. You're exactly the kind of consultant I need." Sarah stared at him, clearly suspicious. "Marcus, you don't need a waitress to consult for a billion-dollar company." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "I don't need a waitress, I need Sarah Mitchell. The same woman who organized the entire school fundraiser that saved our music program. The same woman who tutored half our graduating class and got them through calculus. The same woman who wrote a thesis on sustainable community development that won state awards." He leaned forward, his voice earnest. "That's Sarah Mitchell. Do you remember her?" For the first time since he'd walked into the diner, Sarah's mask completely cracked, tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly looked away, trying to compose herself. "That was a long time ago," she whispered. "It wasn't that long ago," Marcus said softly. "And that person is still in there, I can see her." Rosie appeared beside them. Having listened to the entire exchange, "Girl, if you don't take this opportunity, I'm going to smack you upside the head," she said with mock sternness. "This man is offering you a chance. Don't let your stubborn pride get in the way." "But my shift," Sarah started, "is covered," Rosie interrupted. "Go on, get out of here, talk to your old friend." "And Sarah," Rosie's voice softened, "you've been carrying the world on your shoulders for 10 years. Let someone help you carry it for once." Sarah looked between Marcus and Rosie, her defenses crumbling. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just let me grab my things." She disappeared into the back room, and Rosie turned to Marcus with knowing eyes. "You're a good man, Marcus Chen," she said. "But be careful with her heart. That girl has been broken enough for one lifetime." "I just want to help," Marcus said honestly. "Honey," Rosie said with a slight smile, "helping is how the best love stories always begin." Before Marcus could respond to that, Sarah emerged from the back, having changed out of her uniform into a simple sweater and jeans. She had let her hair down, and despite the exhaustion in her eyes, Marcus could see glimpses of the girl he remembered. "Ready?" she asked nervously. Marcus stood up, leaving a $100 bill on the table for a $15 meal. "Ready?" he confirmed. As they walked toward the door, Rosie called out, "Sarah, take tomorrow off too." "You haven't had a day off in 6 months," Sarah turned back. "Rosie, I can't." "You can and you will," Rosie said firmly. "Doctor's orders, well, diner owner's orders. Same thing." Marcus held the door open for Sarah, and as they stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, he noticed her squinting, as if she had been living in shadows for so long that even natural light felt overwhelming. "Where are we going?" she asked. "For a walk," Marcus said simply. "And to talk about old times and maybe, if you're willing, about new beginnings." They walked side by side down Pine Street, past the familiar landmarks of their youth that now seemed frozen in time. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unspoken words and years of separation. Sarah kept her hands in her pockets, her shoulders slightly hunched as if she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible. "Remember the old library?" Marcus said, pointing to a brick building at the corner. It looked abandoned now, windows boarded up, Weeds growing through cracks in the front steps. They closed it 5 years ago, Sarah said sadly. Budget cuts, now the nearest library is 20 miles away. Most kids here don't have cars or parents who can drive them that far. Marcus made a mental note of that. Another piece of the puzzle he was assembling in his mind. They continued walking until they reached Riverside Park, the same park where they used to eat lunch during senior year when the cafeteria felt too loud and crowded. The old oak tree was still there, bigger now, its branches providing shade over the worn wooden benches beneath. "Can we sit?" Sarah asked, and Marcus noticed she was slightly out of breath. Those long shifts at the diner were taking their toll. They settled onto a bench, and for a moment, they simply watched the park. A young mother pushed her toddler on the swing set. An elderly man walked his dog along the path. Life continued its simple rhythm in this small town, far removed from the frantic pace of Silicon Valley. "I owe you an explanation," Sarah said finally, breaking the silence. "You don't owe me anything," Marcus replied gently. "Yes, I do," she insisted, turning to face him. "You walked into that diner expecting, I don't know, maybe you expected the girl from high school, the one who had all the answers and all the plans. Instead, you found someone who serves coffee for minimum wage and can barely make rent. I found someone who sacrificed everything for the people she loved," Marcus corrected her. "Rosie told me about your mother, about your father, Sarah." "What you did was—" "What I had to do," she interrupted, her voice firm but not harsh. "My mother was dying, Marcus. The cancer spread so fast. The doctor said she had maybe 6 months without treatment. 18 months with it. I couldn't leave her. I couldn't get on a train to New York and pretend that everything was fine while she was here suffering." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. "What about Columbia? Did they offer to defer your scholarship?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "They offered a 1-year deferral. My mother lived for 2 years. By the time she passed, the scholarship was gone. They gave it to someone else, someone who could actually show up." She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I don't regret my choice. I got 2 extra years with my mom. 2 years of memories, of holding her hand, of making her laugh even when she was in pain. Money can't buy that." "No, it can't," Marcus agreed softly. "Then my father had his stroke," Sarah continued, as if she needed to get the whole story out. "He was my rock after Mom died, helped me try to rebuild my life. Then one morning I found him collapsed in the kitchen, half his body paralyzed. He couldn't speak for months. Couldn't feed himself, couldn't do anything." Her voice cracked. "The nursing home cost $2,000 a month. His Social Security covers maybe half of that. I pay the rest." Marcus did the math quickly in his head. That meant Sarah was making barely enough to survive after paying for her father's care. No wonder she walked to work. No wonder she lived in a studio apartment. She was giving everything she had to keep her father in a decent facility. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," Marcus said. And he meant it. Sarah shook her head. "I'm not strong, I'm just tired." So incredibly tired before Marcus could respond. A voice called out from across the park. "Sarah Mitchell, is that you?" They both turned to see Dorothy Harper, the town's most notorious gossip, hurrying toward them with her small dog on a leash. Dorothy had to be in her 70s now, but she moved with surprising speed when there was news to be gathered. "Hi, Mrs. Harper," Sarah said, forcing a polite smile. Dorothy's eyes went straight to Marcus, taking in his expensive suit and watch with sharp interest. "And who is this handsome gentleman?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew exactly who he was. "This is Marcus Chen," Sarah said reluctantly. "We went to high school together." "Marcus Chen," Dorothy repeated, her eyes lighting up like she'd just won the lottery. "The billionaire. Oh my goodness, I saw you on television. You're opening that factory here." She looked between Marcus and Sarah, her mind clearly racing with implications. "And you two are, what, having a reunion?" "Just catching up," Marcus said diplomatically. But Dorothy wasn't listening anymore. She was already planning her phone calls. Marcus could practically see the gears turning in her head by tomorrow morning. The entire town would know that Sarah Mitchell was seen with Marcus Chen in the park. The rumors would spread like wildfire. "Well, isn't this just wonderful?" Dorothy gushed. "Our little Sarah. Spending time with such an important man. You know, Sarah. I always knew you were destined for great things, even when, well, even during those difficult years." Sarah's jaw tightened, and Marcus could see the humiliation in her eyes. Dorothy's words were kind on the surface, but underneath was the implication that Sarah had somehow failed, that she needed rescuing. "Mrs. Harper, Marcus said firmly but politely. It was nice meeting you. But Sarah and I have an important business meeting to get to. Business meeting? Dorothy's eyebrows shot up. Oh, how exciting. Marcus stood and offered his hand to Sarah, who took it gratefully. Enjoy your afternoon? Mrs. Harper, he said, already guiding Sarah away. As they walked back toward the street, Sarah let out a long breath. Well, that's done it, she said. By tonight, everyone in town will think we're either dating or that you're offering me some kind of charity case job. Let them think what they want, Marcus said. But Sarah, I meant what I said about needing your help. This isn't charity, this is business. I'm going to make you an offer. And I want you to really consider it. Sarah stopped walking and looked at him warily. What kind of offer? Marcus took a deep breath. I want to hire you as my community liaison consultant for the Riverside project. Real position, real salary. You'd help me understand what this town needs, who to hire, how to make this factory actually benefit the people who live here. 6-month contract to start, salary of $80,000. Sarah's eyes went wide. 80,000, she whispered. Marcus, that's what you're worth, he finished. Actually, it's less than what you're worth. But it's what I can justify to my board for a consultant position. He looked at her seriously. What do you say? Will you help me help this town? Sarah stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at Marcus as if he had just spoken a foreign language. $80,000. That was more money than she had made in the last 3 years combined. It was enough to pay for her father's care without lying awake at night doing mental calculations. It was enough to maybe, just maybe, start thinking about her own future again. I can't accept this, she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. Why not? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Because it feels like pity, Sarah said, the words tumbling out. You walk into that diner, see your old classmate working as a waitress, hear my sad story from Rosie, and suddenly you're offering me a job that I'm not even qualified for. She shook her head. I don't need your guilt. Marcus, this isn't guilt, Marcus said firmly. And you are qualified, more qualified than most of the consultants I work with who have fancy degrees but no real understanding of community. He stepped closer, his voice softening. Sarah, I'm not offering you this job because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because I need someone who actually cares about this town. Someone who won't just see it as another project on their resume. Sarah bit her lip, clearly torn between pride and desperation. I need to think about it, she said quietly. Fair enough, Marcus agreed, but while you're thinking, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you 25 years ago. Sarah looked up at him. Confusion in her eyes, Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to reveal something he'd kept hidden for decades. I had a massive crush on you in high school, he said, the words coming out in a rush. From sophomore year until graduation, I was completely, hopelessly in love with you. Sarah's mouth fell open in shock. What? No, you never. We barely even talked because I was terrified, Marcus admitted, a rueful smile on his face. You were Sarah Mitchell, the smart, beautiful, popular girl who was going to change the world. And I was the poor kid who wore the same 3 shirts and brought peanut butter sandwiches every day. Why would you ever notice me? Marcus, Sarah whispered, her eyes filling with tears again. The day you stood up to Brad Morrison for me, Marcus continued. The day you told him that real strength wasn't about bullying people. I fell so hard for you that I wrote your name in every one of my notebooks. I used to rehearse conversations with you in the mirror, practice asking you to prom, but I could never work up the courage. Sarah sat back down on the park bench, looking dazed. I never knew, she said softly. You weren't supposed to know, Marcus said, sitting beside her. I was too scared of rejection, too scared of looking stupid, so I just watched you from a distance and dreamed about what could have been. He paused, gathering his thoughts. After graduation, I left for California with nothing but student loans and determination. I told myself I would become successful enough that one day, maybe, I could come back and you would see me as someone worthy. Worthy, Sarah repeated, shaking her head in disbelief. Marcus, I was never some unreachable goddess. I was just a girl. You were never just anything, Marcus said, echoing his words from the diner. And maybe that's why I'm here now. Maybe fate brought me back to this town at exactly the right moment. Not for a factory, but for this, for you. Sarah was crying now, but she was also smiling through her tears. I need to tell you something too, she said, her voice shaking. Something I've never told anyone. Marcus waited. Giving her space to speak, I knew about your crush, Sarah said, and watched as Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. Or at least I suspected I saw the way you looked at me in English class. I noticed when you would take the long way to your locker just to walk past mine and Marcus. She took a deep breath. I was flattered, maybe even interested, but I was too scared to do anything about it. Now it was Marcus's turn to be shocked. You were interested in me. You were different from all the other guys, Sarah explained. You were kind, genuinely kind. Not just to impress people, but because that's who you were. You worked harder than anyone I knew. You had dreams that went beyond this small town. She laughed sadly. I remember thinking that you were going to do something amazing with your life. And I was right. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Marcus asked. Because I was a coward, Sarah admitted. I was so focused on being perfect, on maintaining this image of having everything together, that I was afraid to take any risks. I thought if I showed interest in you, people would think I was slumming it, that I was dating down. She wiped her eyes. I cared too much about what other people thought, and I regret that. I regret it every day. They sat in silence for a moment, processing these revelations that had been buried for a quarter century. We were both idiots, Marcus said finally, and Sarah laughed despite her tears. Complete idiots, she agreed. Marcus took her hand gently, and she didn't pull away. Sarah, I can't change the past. I can't give us back those 25 years, but maybe we can start over. Maybe we can have a second chance, not as the kids we were, but as the people we've become. Sarah looked down at their joined hands. I'm not that girl anymore, Marcus. I'm broken, I'm tired. I have baggage that would sink a ship. And I'm not that scared boy anymore, Marcus countered. I've built companies and made fortunes, but you know what I learned. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with all those years. I told myself I was working toward something, but really, I think I was just trying to become someone you would notice. He squeezed her hand. Well, you've noticed me now, and I've noticed you, the real you. Not some fantasy from high school, but the strong, compassionate, incredible woman sitting next to me. Sarah closed her eyes, more tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. You don't have to decide right now, Marcus said gently. Just think about the job offer. Come work with me for 6 months. Let me show you that this isn't charity or pity. Let me prove that you deserve good things, Sarah. That you deserve to be happy. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression. A tiny crack in the walls she had built around herself. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I'll think about it. Really think about it, Marcus smiled, genuine and warm. That's all I'm asking. That evening, Marcus checked into the Riverside Inn, a modest hotel on Main Street that had seen better days. It wasn't the luxury accommodation his assistant had probably tried to book, but Marcus had specifically requested something local, something that kept him connected to the town rather than isolated from it. He couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Sarah, the revelation that she had known about his feelings, that she might have even reciprocated them, changed everything he thought he knew about his past. All those years of wondering what if suddenly had a different answer than he'd imagined. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I want to show you something. 8 a.m. at the diner. Marcus smiled and quickly replied, I'll be there. He spent the rest of the evening researching. His assistant had sent him detailed information about Riverside's economic situation. The numbers were worse than he'd thought. Unemployment was at 18%. Most young people left town as soon as they graduated because there were no opportunities. The average household income was $30,000 below the national average. This town wasn't just struggling, it was dying. But Marcus saw potential where others saw problems. He pulled up the factory plans and started making notes. Modifications that could employ more people. Training programs that could give locals valuable skills. Community partnerships that could revitalize the whole area. This wasn't just about building a factory anymore. This was about saving a town. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Rosie's place at 7:45. Eager and slightly nervous, Sarah was already there, sitting in a booth with 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder in front of her. She had dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she hadn't slept much either. Morning, Marcus said, sliding into the seat across from her. Morning, Sarah replied, pushing one of the coffee cups toward him. I've been up all night thinking about your offer. Marcus's heart raced, but he kept his expression calm. And and I want to show you why I can't accept it, Sarah said, opening the folder. At least not the way you've presented it. That wasn't what Marcus expected. He looked down at the papers she was spreading on the table. They were detailed notes, charts, demographic information, employment statistics. She had created an entire analysis of Riverside's economic situation. I spent the night at the public library in the next town, Sarah explained. Use their computers to research your company, your factory plans, the impact similar projects have had in other communities. She pointed to one of her charts. Your current plan will create 200 jobs, which is good. But it's not enough to really change things here. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. Riverside doesn't just need jobs, Sarah continued, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. It needs infrastructure. The library is closed. The community center shut down 3 years ago. We have one grocery store that charges inflated prices because there's no competition. Young families are leaving because there are no good schools or childcare options. She pulled out another page. Your factory could be the catalyst for all of that. But only if it's done right. Marcus studied her notes, impressed by the depth of her analysis. This was the Sarah Mitchell he remembered. The brilliant mind that had won state awards, she hadn't lost that. She had just buried it under years of survival mode. What are you proposing? Marcus asked. Sarah took a deep breath. If you're serious about hiring me, I don't want to be just a consultant who nods and smiles while you make all the decisions. I want real input. I want to help design a comprehensive community development plan that goes beyond just the factory. Her eyes met his, fierce and determined. I want to reopen the library, create an apprenticeship program for local teenagers, establish a scholarship fund for kids who want to go to college. I want to transform this town, not just put a Band-Aid on it. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This was exactly what he needed. Someone with vision. Someone who cared enough to think bigger than just immediate profits. How much would all of that cost? He asked. Sarah bit her lip. Including the factory. Probably 15 million over 5 years, she said. I know that's a lot. I know your board might never approve it. But they'll approve it, Marcus interrupted. A smile spreading across his face. Sarah blinked. What? They'll approve it because I own controlling interest in the company, Marcus explained. And because everything you just described aligns perfectly with our corporate social responsibility goals. We've been looking for a model community development project. You just handed me the blueprint. Sarah stared at him, stunned. Are you serious? Completely serious, Marcus said. But I have conditions. Sarah's expression became guarded again. What conditions? First, you have to accept the consultant position, and I'm raising your salary to $120,000, Marcus said, holding up a hand when she started to protest. That's the going rate for community development directors in the private sector. You'll be doing that job and more. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Second, Marcus continued, I'm setting up a trust fund for your father's care. Medical expenses fully covered for the rest of his life. Marcus, no, that's too much, Sarah said, finding her voice. It's not charity, Marcus said firmly. It's an employment benefit. I can't have my community development director working 80-hour weeks at multiple jobs. You need to be able to focus on this project. And you can't do that if you're worried about your father. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she was also smiling. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Because 25 years ago, I was too scared to take a chance on something that could have been amazing. I'm not making that mistake again. He squeezed her hand gently. And because you deserve it, Sarah. You deserve to have someone fight for you the way you've been fighting for everyone else. Sarah squeezed his hand back. Unable to speak through her tears, Rosie appeared beside their table with a box of tissues. About damn time, she said, placing the tissues down with a satisfied smile. I've been watching you two dance around each other since yesterday. Now stop crying and start planning. This town needs you both. Sarah laughed and cried at the same time, reaching for a tissue. Okay, she said, looking at Marcus with hope shining in her eyes for the first time in years. Okay, let's do this. Let's change everything, Marcus grinned. Partners, Sarah agreed, and in that moment, sitting in a small-town diner with terrible coffee and the best apple pie in the world, Marcus Chen realized something important. Success wasn't about how much money you made or how many companies you built. Success was about finding your way back to the people and places that mattered. about using your resources to lift others up, about second chances and new beginnings. Part 8. A new beginning. For both 6 months had passed since that morning in Rosie's place, and Riverside looked like a completely different town. Construction crews worked daily on the new factory, a modern building with solar panels and green spaces that would officially open next month. But the factory was just the beginning. The old library had been renovated and reopened, now filled with new computers, thousands of books, and a dedicated study space for students. On opening day, over 300 people showed up, including Sarah's father in his wheelchair, tears streaming down his face as he watched his daughter cut the ribbon. The community center was next, transformed into a hub for job training programs, after-school activities, and senior services. Local teenagers were enrolled in paid apprenticeships, learning skills in manufacturing, technology, and business management. The scholarship fund had already awarded full rides to 5 graduating seniors. With more planned for next year, Sarah had thrown herself into the work with a passion that amazed everyone. Including herself, she coordinated with local businesses, met with families, organized town halls, and somehow managed to remember everyone's names and stories. She wasn't just planning programs, she was rebuilding hope, one person at a time. Marcus had relocated his primary office to Riverside for the duration of the project, much to his board's confusion, but he didn't care. He attended every meeting Sarah organized, approved every proposal she presented, and watched with pride as she transformed from the exhausted waitress into the confident leader she was always meant to be. They worked together almost every day, often late into the night. Their relationship had shifted into something deeper than friendship, but not quite romance. There was an understanding between them, an unspoken agreement that they were building something together. Both professionally and personally, they were taking it slow, letting trust and affection grow naturally. Today was special, though. Today was the town celebration marking the completion of Phase 1. Main Street was blocked off for a festival, with food vendors, live music, and families enjoying the warm Saturday afternoon. Children ran through the streets with balloons. Elderly couples danced to the band, and everywhere Marcus looked, he saw smiling faces. He found Sarah near the stage, talking to a group of teenagers who had just completed their first month of apprenticeship training. She was laughing at something one of them said, her face bright with genuine joy. She wore a simple blue dress and had let her hair down, and Marcus thought she had never looked more beautiful. "Ms. Mitchell," one of the teenagers was saying, "my mom wanted me to thank you," she said, "because of this program. I'm the first person in our family who might actually go to college." Sarah's eyes misted over, but she was smiling. "You're doing the work, James. I'm just opening doors. You're the one walking through them." Marcus approached as the teenagers dispersed. "You're good at this," he said. Sarah turned to him, her smile growing wider. "I forgot how good it feels," she admitted. "To make a difference. To matter." "You always mattered," Marcus said softly. Before Sarah could respond, Mayor Patterson took the stage and called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed through the speakers, "I want to thank you all for coming today. 6 months ago, this town was dying. Our young people were leaving, businesses were closing, and hope was in short supply." He paused, looking directly at Marcus and Sarah. "Then 2 people walked back into our lives and reminded us what community really means." The crowd applauded, and Marcus felt uncomfortable with the attention. But Sarah squeezed his hand. "Marcus Chen brought us jobs and investment," the mayor continued. "But more importantly, he brought us vision, and Sarah Mitchell, our hometown hero who never gave up on us even when times were hardest, brought us heart." He gestured for them to come up on stage. Sarah looked at Marcus nervously, but he nodded encouragingly. They walked up together hand in hand to thunderous applause. The mayor handed the microphone to Sarah. She looked out at the crowd, at all the familiar faces, people she had grown up with, served coffee to, worried about. "I don't have a big speech prepared," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I just want to say that 6 months ago I was lost. I had forgotten who I was and what I was capable of." She glanced at Marcus. "Then an old friend reminded me that our past doesn't define us. Our circumstances don't limit us. And it's never too late for a second chance." She turned to address the crowd fully. "This town gave me everything. It raised me, supported my family during the hardest times, and never let us fall completely." Her voice grew stronger. "Now it's our turn to give back. This factory, these programs, this renewal, It's just the beginning together. We're going to make Riverside a place where people want to stay, where families can thrive, where dreams don't have to die just because you choose to stay home." The crowd erupted in cheers. People were crying, hugging, celebrating not just what had been accomplished, but what was still to come. The mayor took the microphone back and looked at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, do you have anything to add?" Marcus stepped forward, suddenly nervous despite having spoken to audiences of thousands before. "I left this town 25 years ago because I thought I had to leave to become somebody," he said. "I thought success meant skyscrapers and boardrooms and wealth." He looked at Sarah. "But coming back here taught me that real success is about connection, about using what you have to help others, about finding your way home." He paused, then made a decision. One he hadn't planned but felt absolutely right. "Sarah," he said, turning to face her fully. "6 months ago, I walked into a diner and found the girl I never stopped thinking about. The girl I was too scared to talk to in high school. The girl who turned out to be even more incredible than I remembered." He took both her hands. "We've been taking things slow, building a partnership, rebuilding this town, but I don't want to wait anymore." Sarah's eyes went wide. "Marcus, what are you?" "I'm not proposing," Marcus said quickly, seeing the panic in her face. "Not yet, anyway. I know we need more time." He smiled. "But I am asking you, Sarah Mitchell, if you would consider going on an actual date with me, dinner, maybe a movie, something that isn't about budgets and construction permits." Sarah laughed, tears running down her cheeks. "You're asking me out in front of the entire town." "I am," Marcus confirmed, "because I wasted 25 years being scared. I'm not wasting another day." The crowd was silent. Waiting, Dorothy Harper had her phone out, probably live streaming the whole thing. Sarah looked at Marcus, at this man who had come back into her life like a miracle, who had seen her at her lowest and somehow helped her find her highest. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I would love to go on a date with you, Marcus Chen." The crowd exploded with cheers and applause. Rosie was crying openly. Even the mayor was wiping his eyes. Marcus pulled Sarah into a hug and she wrapped her arms around him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered in his ear. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for coming back." "Thank you for giving me a reason to come home," Marcus whispered back. They stood there on that stage, holding each other while their town celebrated around them. Two people who had taken very different paths, who had both known success and failure, joy and heartbreak, were finally finding their way back to each other. The story of the billionaire and the waitress would indeed make headlines, just as the title promised, but it wasn't the story people expected. It wasn't about a rich man rescuing a poor woman. It was about two people rescuing each other, about a community coming together, about second chances and the courage to rebuild. And in a small town called Riverside, where hope had been all but lost, love and purpose bloomed again, proving that sometimes the best endings are really just new beginnings in disguise.